Would you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight. Amen. Well, I got to start by thanking Rodney for that awesome prayer, the prayer of courage. I need it today because I am filled with anxiety having the honor to speak in front of you all. But I need to start by saying that although you all see me light up whenever I sing, singing in church also brings me that kind of anxiety. Questions like, what page is the hymn in the bulletin? Can I get there fast enough? And are we standing for this one? Buzz in my head before each song. But once we get into the first verse, I surrender to the moment and I begin to experience being part of something that's greater than myself. There was a study conducted at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden that monitored the heart rates of members of a high school choir as they joined their voices in song. The scientists attached monitors to the ears of the singers to monitor their heart rates as they sang. And they found that as they navigated the notes of a Swedish hymn, that their heart rates slowed down. And the act of singing allowed them to breathe as one. This study brought me back to Nishawayne Elementary School, sitting on the floor of first period class, where my teacher would start every day in song. And those songs still live in my memory, but there's One Love by Bob Marley that has a very special place. And we would sing it, and it was as if she was saying, we are one, and we are going to work together today. So, I'm going to ask you all to sing it with me. I'll start, and then I'm going to ask you to sing it back. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. Your turn. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. Ooh. Y'all sounding good today. So, I started with this song because the Christ hymn, Philippians 2, is actually one of the earliest Christian hymns. And we know from the other New Testament texts, Colossians and Ephesians, that the early Christians were known for being hymn singers. It is important to note, however, that when Paul writes this hymn in a letter to the church in Philippi, he is sitting alone in prison. He is physically isolated, and he is away from the community that holds a very special place in his heart. The church in Philippi had just sent Paul a messenger with gifts showing that they were still in a continuing partnership. And Paul writes this letter back, with this hymn included, to show that Jesus, the model of Jesus, is a model for life. And he calls on the prayers and he calls on the hymns that are keeping his spirit alive in this moment of isolation. But as I read this letter, I still got the sense that Paul was feeling lonely. You wonder if Paul, even after he founded all of those early churches, didn't feel the gulf between himself and the communities that he loved. You wonder if even Paul, after he had his conversion on the road to Damascus, didn't feel a little bit of isolation from the people that he loved, from God. You wonder if even Paul struggled with a feeling of estrangement. And maybe the presence of this hymn is a calling back to a sense and a feeling of unity. Because the preface of this hymn is a consolation that we all exist within one spirit. We share the same love, and that we can be in full accord. And this reminds me of the lyrics of Bob Marley's One Love. But for some reason, I have a hard time getting into the mindset that this oneness is already a reality and not just a goal. Even though everything from quantum mechanics to our shared fate in the face of global warming tell us that we are intimately linked, still, as I struggle to survive as an individual, I fall out of this consciousness of unity. And for as long as there has been a recorded form of communication, there have been humans struggling with this sense of separateness, this sense of estrangement from one another. And the book of Genesis is one example. In the second chapter of Genesis, there is the beginning that speaks of a unity between humanity, the natural world, and God. And they call this the Garden of Eden. Then, in the story, a serpent whispers in the ears of the first humans, promising that they can be more than human. They can be God. What a promise. So, of course, Adam and Eve bite into the apple, and they fall under an illusion that they are separate. For the first time, Adam and Eve saw that they were naked. For the first time, they felt shame. And for the first time, God looked on her creation and had to call out, "Where are you?" Religious people have called this story the fall, and there have been plenty of problematic interpretations because of it. The character of Eve has been used as an excuse to suppress women. The apple has been lifted up as a symbol to suppress especially LGBTQ sexuality. And the story that has been made to metaphorically help us understand ourselves and help us to wrestle with this sense of separateness has actually been used to make us ashamed of our humanity. And yet, didn't the separation start when Adam and Eve tried to be God? When they embraced being human, they lived in harmony with all things, interdependent with all of creation. The separation began when Adam and Eve were trying to be God. In the myth, this is the movement that symbolizes the choice to live in a state of separateness for the illusion of being in control. This is the moment that symbolizes the individual leaping out of the collective to put the self before the whole, and this is the moment that symbolizes falling under the spell of the individual ego instead of the collective consciousness of unity. And it seems that the Christ hymn in Philippians is seeming to say that God had to become human in order to teach humans to love and accept just being human. That God had to take the form of a human in order to show humans that despite all that can happen, it is okay to be flawed and imperfect, but beautifully created in the image of God. The Jesus path is the reverse of the ego pattern. Adam, made in the image of God, wanted to be God. So Adam experienced alienation. Jesus, in the form of God, the Philippians hymn says, did not regard equality with God, but instead took the form of a servant to care for humanity. The ego can cause isolation, but surrendering to a communion beyond oneself reestablishes unity. And maybe what we are surrendering is the mindset that we have something to prove. Maybe we are surrendering the attitude that we have to try to be more than human. The Trappist monk and mystic Thomas Merton said that it was his supposed holiness that kept him from other people. Then, like Paul on the road to Damascus, he's standing on a street corner in Kentucky, and as the cars are rushing by, he looks at all of the people, and he says that it was like waking from the dream of separateness. Merton continues, I was no longer in the superfluous self-isolation, in a special world, the world of supposed holiness. This sense of liberation from an illusionary difference was such a relief and such a joy that I almost laughed out loud. I have the immense joy of simply being human, a member of a group in which God himself became incarnate. Merton credits this moment on the street corner in Kentucky for his inspiration for a life of service to others. He looked around and he realized that I am theirs, and they are mine, and he can never remain the same. We belong to one another. When we give up trying to be God, when we give up trying to be in control, when we give up trying to be perfect all the time, we give ourselves the space to experience God. If we let go, then we can allow ourselves to be carried by something that's greater than us. The Jesus story tells us that when we are weak, we can be made strong. Paul is calling on this consolation in the Christ hymn. The encouragement from Christ is that even when we feel alone, we are always sharing in the same Spirit, even when we don't recognize it. Being made in the image of God, we all possess the same love that is guiding us, especially in times of fear, especially in times of isolation. Maybe those troubled times are the perfect times to realign. And yet, in the struggle for survival, we seem to forget this help. That's why the civil rights marchers had to sing it out so that everyone could hear that they were never marching alone. The Spirit of God was with them. They sang of the Spirit of God that guided their feet while they ran the race. And knowing that they were guided, they knew that they would never run the race in vain. And I love that early Christians came together to sing hymns so that they would be reminded that we never run the race alone. I love that early Christians sang hymns so that they would be reminded that we share in the same Spirit and the same love, even when we can't recognize it. I love that we all come together to remember that too, every Sunday. That in a fractured world, we can remember that we too are existing in the Spirit of God at all times. And there is always a unity. And that it's okay to just be human. And when we sing and we uplift our voices, and they're sometimes off key, and they are sometimes in need of knowing the words, that we can join together and that we can sing in one voice and proclaim the one love that is our birthright, that we can never fall away from. So in this spirit of unity, in this spirit of community, in this spirit of church, I ask you to one more time sing One Love with me. And please stand up. Please stand up. I'll sing it one time and please sing it back to me. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. Come on now. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. One more time. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. Thank you all.